Hi, my name's Charles Anderson. I'm a chemical engineer who's been using Excel for many years, and I thought what I'd try and do is make a couple of videos to show some of the tips and tricks I've learnt. Hopefully they'll be useful to other people. What I'm going to try and do today is show you how to use some of the lookup functions. I use this quite a lot when I've got data coming from other sources, maybe from the analytical lab or that I've pulled off of the website that isn't quite in the format that I'd like it to be in, and I want to sort it out and put it into a consistent format. What's nice about doing it with some of these functions is that I can get it into a clean format without having to manually move the data around a bunch myself. So what I've done is let's just pretend I want to know how much of the US energy available is coming from energy consumption is coming from biodiesel. So what I've done is I've gone to the US Energy Information Agency, pulled down the data that's available for the total energy use and the biodiesel use as a function of time. A couple of things you'll notice straight away is that the data is in different bases, so the total energy is in quadrillion BTUs a year. The biodiesel is in thousands of barrels a day. The data is available in different time frames, so the total energy is in the sort of 1980 to 2015 range, whereas the biodiesel is only available from 2015. From 2000, but it goes on to 2016. So I've got data in slightly different formats, slightly different time ranges. I want to get that all consistent. First thing to do is use the units of measurement. So I'm going to convert those. I want to do a BTU to joule. I'm going to use the Excel function convert. It's got a nice built-in unit of measurement converter that lets me convert a number from BTUs to joules. That's kind of handy. Unfortunately, it doesn't have thousands of barrels of biodiesel as a standard unit. It's a fairly limited set of units of measurement it's got available. So I've gone ahead and coded that myself. I put it on a cheat sheet off here to the side, so I'm just going to bring that across and paste it in. Things to be careful of is obviously I've got different time frames as well as different energy bases, so that's kind of a fun one. Okay. Now what I want to do is start building my table, so I'm going to start with the date. For the date, what I want to do is what I did there, I control-clicked and then shift-control down to grab a full range of data, then control-C to copy it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paste that data in here, and then I'm going to do the same with this data set, control-C, come to the bottom of that list and paste it in there. So what I've got now is all the time data. What I'm going to do is grab it all, come to the data tab, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the duplicates from that data. So what that'll do is it'll remove the 16 repeats, so the years 2000 to 2015, and leave 37 unique items. So now I've got my dates. For whatever reason, I'm going to choose to report those in actually, first of all, what I want to do is I want to sort those into normal oldest to newest. So I'm going to just use the sort function on that data range, and you can see now it starts at 1980 and runs to 2016. Finally, what I want to do is I want to change the format so it just shows the year. So I'm going to come in to the custom format, and I'm going to remove the month and days, just report the year. So now I've got just the year. Okay, finally I'm now going to come do my lookup table at last. So here's my primary data. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the VLookup function, and I'm going to make a couple of errors here, but just to show you how it can go wrong and then how to fix it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for the date in the field here, so shift control down, shift right to highlight the data, and then what I want to do is, having found the lookup value in the first column, I'm then going to report the value in the second column as the output. So that gives me the data. I'm going to then double click on that little box to copy it down to fill the whole range, and I'll see what it teaches me. Interestingly, I've made a couple of mistakes. I often make these myself. So it looks okay for the first formula, but when I come down to here, you can see that I haven't made the range an absolute. I've made it a relative reference, and so that range is moving as the data moves on. So the first thing to do is to fix that range. I'm going to hit F4, highlight them and hit F4, which turns it into an absolute reference, and then copy that formula down. Now what you can see is I don't seem to be able to pick up the data for 1980. It doesn't pick up data until 1998. The 98 data is correct, but then the 99 data is actually reporting this value down here at the bottom. So the reason for that is by default VLookup is expecting you to have your source data sorted alphanumerically. In this case it's reverse alphanumeric, so that's messing up. What I can do, fortunately though, is have rather than the closest possible match, I can force it to do an absolute match. And if I do that, then it doesn't require the data to be alpha sorted. It also, though, if there's a slight difference in the two numbers, the lookup number and the number in the reference column in the range, then it'll report not available. So the reason I copied and pasted the actual dates was to make sure that they were exactly identical. So now when I make those changes, I get this data over here reverse sorted into the right order, but for the 2016 where the data was missing, I get a not available because there is no data for 2016 available in this data range. In this case, that would be a relatively simple thing to just resort this data, but hopefully you get the point. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for the biodiesel. Biodiesel. So this is going to be equals VLookup. I'm using the VLookup in this case because my data is sorted in the form of columns. If it was in rows, then I could use the HLookup. It's basically the same. So I'm going to look up that value in this range that by hitting F4 I'm going to make absolute. I'm going to report the data in the second column, which is the energy, and I'm going to make it an absolute match. So I'm going to make that false. And so now you'll see there's no data for 1980, so it's reporting NA, continues to do that until 2000, where it's sort of NA, but it's not actually formatted in the standard Excel way, and then I've got the actual data. Now I'm going to move the data over into common units, so I'm going to use petajoules a year, and so this is going to be equal to this value times the BTUs per joule. So I can do it that way and that works fine, but what's actually kind of useful is in Excel you can come in and you can name these cells. When you're going to be using them a lot, I find it handy to name the cells. So if I name that cell BTU per joule and I name this cell, let's say barrel to BTU, now I've got those references, and here you can see what I can do is instead of saying J1 and trying to make sure I get that right, I can go BTU to joule and it'll find that cell, and if I copy that cell down, you'll see it remains holding that absolute reference. I'm not going to go into name cells too much, but they're available here under formulas, name manager. You can see it's telling you what the value is, where the value is coming from, what the names are, and you can do things like edit and remove and add new ones there. The final thing I'm going to do is you can see, because I've got these S's, meaning the data was not too small to report, that comes across when I do is a mathematical function as a hash value error. I don't want that, so what I want to do is actually I'm going to use the if error function to, what this does is it says use this formula, but if you get an error then return this value, and I'm going to use the not available function as the error value, so that now when I copy that formula down you'll see those values become hash NAs. The reason I do that is if Excel's smart enough that it'll recognize hash NA as not available as opposed to the data as an error. So if I then plot that data, it'll not show in a graph. It'll give a blank space instead of forcing the line down to 0, which kind of makes my graph look ugly. Okay, biodiesel, I'll do the same thing. I'm going to say if I've got an error, if I don't have an error, then my value is going to be this number times BT barrels, thousands of barrels a day to quadrillion BTUs a year, times BTU to joule to convert it into petajoules per year. So now, oops, I've got to give it and if I have a mistake, in this case I'm going to say just report 0, because there's no data before 2000. I don't think there was much biodiesel consumed in the US in the 80s and 90s, so I'll just report that as a 0. So now if I do the biodiesel as a %, I can make that that value over this value. I'm going to want to look at that as a % with a couple of decimal places, and so now I've got my results. Final thing to do is plot that. So highlight the data, and then I could come into insert graph and then click here, but if I right click I can move that up to my quick access toolbar, which is I do a lot of XY plotting, so I find it useful to move things I use frequently up to this toolbar, and so now I can make my XY plot there. The final thing I'm going to do is try and clean up this graph a little bit. The date formatting always irritates me. You can see it's starting at 0 because most graphs you want to start from 0. The date is actually stored as a number. I think it's the days since January 1st, 1990. So if what I do is I copy that value and paste the absolute value here, and then copy that value and paste that here, now I know the range of my actual data. So if I come back and look at this axis, I can actually force it to match the data that I've got, and 42370. You can see if I do that, my axis range is, in this case it's not too bad, but it's sort of 5 years, 5 years, 6 years, 6 years, sorry, 5, 6. So it's sort of jumping through the year. So what I want to do is actually just let's make that every 10 years. So that'd be 365. There's actually 365.25, depending on how you count it, days per year. If I make it 2.5 though, what will happen is Excel's smart enough to recognize that 1980 was a leap year, and so this is like the 31st, or actually the 30th of December. So I'm going to just cheat and make that 0.3, so that I'm slightly more than a year. I'm stepping forward by a little bit, sort of a half day every decade, but that's good enough for plotting on this scale. Okay, that's what I wanted to show you. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this is useful, and I will try and make some more recordings later. Goodbye.